Braves and baseball fans, it's time to take a trip from coast to coast across Major League Baseball.
There it goes, a long drive. If it stays fair, home run.
One strike away. Sandy into his windup. Here's the pitch. Swung on and missed a perfect game.
Fly ball deep left center. Grissom on the run. Yes! The Atlanta Braves have given you a championship. Listen to this crowd.
Left side, Swanson to first. Braves, world champions.
Braves and baseball talk, straight from the diamond.
Brought to you by Mark Spain Real Estate. Get a guaranteed offer on your home today. And Window Nation. Call the pros at Window Nation at 866-90Nation.
Here's Grant McAuley.
Hello and welcome to From the Diamond. I am Grant McAuley from the Kia Studios of Sports Radio 92.9 The Game as we wrap up the weekend in general and wrap up a very good weekend for the Atlanta Braves up in Cleveland. I don't get to say this too often. In fact, as we've documented over the past couple of weeks, haven't had a whole lot of wins on Sundays this year, so usually I was coming in doing this show under the pall of either a disappointing day or a disappointing weekend/series, and that's been a nice trend to reverse here lately because all of a sudden the Braves who, and I talked about this on social media, if you're following me on there, then you already know this, but at Grant McAuley, in case you're not, and right here on the show for the live real-time stuff that we're about to do here for the next couple of hours, but it got late early on the Braves this year. There's just no two ways about that. They are in a disappointing stretch in which I think the old saying goes, you just play out the string. And the Braves are not used to that. It has been a while since a Braves club, particularly one with any kind of expectations of playing much more meaningful games this time of year, has had to play out the string. So, you know, you'll take what you can, where you can, I think both individually and collectively for the Braves down the stretch to just start to show you maybe reminders of A, what certain players are capable of, and B, to a lesser extent, or at least to some extent, let's call it that, what the team is capable of when it plays up to its A, capabilities, and B, expectations, though, again, the latter kind of went out the window when the Braves really just went into the tank in the month of July. Really, June and July both, but particularly July was like that last big opportunity to kind of turn things around and mathematically feel like you had the opportunity to do all those things you set out to do in spring training. But now, as we look at it, and the Braves are trying to kind of pull themselves up by the bootstraps and do a little something with 2025. It's hard to see it coming together when the odds of accomplishing the goal are under 1%, which is kind of where the Braves playoff odds are sitting these days, in case you hadn't noticed that. Atlanta, though, sweeping away the Cleveland Guardians over the weekend with three, I thought, really entertaining games. And the kind of games that just make you feel a little bit more, again, optimistic about what's ahead for this club beyond the 2025 season, which, if we all want to call it a lost year at this point, from the go win the World Series, go to the playoffs, do that kind of stuff realm of things, yeah, I totally get that. But some of the things that you saw, particularly what Hurston Waldrop did, again, we're going to talk a lot about him in this show, what he has shown over this very small sample, but very impressive sample since being called up basically as an emergency starter or an emergency pitcher for that Speedway Classic, and now an emergency starter, if you will, down the stretch to just help the Braves put together some semblance of a rotation. He just continues to make the most of that opportunity and to pitch extremely well. And that's what you kind of hope for out of your former first-round picks. But he's not the only former first-rounder for the Braves that's doing some things in rotation. Joey Wentz, again, on Saturday, was able to go out and toss himself a very nice game and continue, I think, in some way, shape, or form. And yes, there's 6 or so weeks of the season left to figure all this out, but maybe pitch his way into the Braves' plans beyond simply the 2025 season, beyond being somebody that was picked up off the scrap heap to help you out. But for now, like, you'll just try to do what you can with what you got. If you're a Hurston Waldrop, if you're a Joey Wentz, most certainly, and for a lot of other Braves players, the opportunity to end the season on a better note than which it started. Now, it can't start off in much of a worse fashion than the Braves did by going 0-7 on their opening road trip. And that feels like, to be honest with you, an eternity ago. But when you look at the bigger picture of things, it was certainly a harbinger of what was to come for the Braves in terms of just how difficult this season has been. You dig yourself that kind of hole in the first couple of series, it just doesn't bode well, even when you got 155 games to go after that. And of the 155 that have followed, there has been some highs, a lot of lows, and not a whole lot of in between, unfortunately, for this Braves club. But they do seem to, again, be figuring a few things out. A 5-4 win over the Guardians on Sunday in comeback fashion, I might add. So very impressive work by the Braves offense in the middle innings to down 4-1. Maybe not feeling like Sunday was going to be their day. Just keep chipping away to give themselves the opportunity to win a baseball game, and they were able to do so with a couple of 2-run frames and the go-ahead homer from Jurickson Profar that gave the Braves this 5-4 victory and was able to help them close out a 3-game sweep. And I think we know those have been kind of rare for the Braves. But here lately, the winning has started to happen much more consistently. They're on a 5-game winning streak, which may not sound like much, especially when we're talking about the Atlanta Braves of recent years, but it is their longest winning streak of the season. Let me repeat that. A 5-game winning streak in the middle of August is their longest winning streak of the season. Now, I don't say that to take anything away from the 5-gamer. And if they want to keep winning baseball games, that will also be an outcome that I think the Braves and Braves fans will be happy to see. It's just crazy to be saying that in the middle of August. They've finally managed to win 5 games in a row. When you consider how they've done things the last few years, and again, I know we don't have to go through the whole thing, not even the Reader's Digest version of this thing, the too long didn't read version of, the first 3-4 months of this year have been nothing like we've seen in recent years. But there had been those times, and whether it was 2022 or 2023, where the Braves would just get on a tear. They'd win 10 games in a row. They'd win 12 or so games in a row. They'd get themselves back into the NL East race or push themselves at least into playoff contention. But those are a couple of ships that, I'm sorry to say, I think I can still see them like way off on the horizon line, but they have certainly left the dock. And for the Braves, I think, again, it has more to do with trying to find ways to individually and collectively make something of the time that they have left in this season. Now, how much time do they have left? Well, they've got 38 games to go. If they were to go 38-0, they'd probably be in a really good spot as far as playoff contention is concerned. I don't know that that's going to be the case. If they go 30-8, they might push themselves into playoff contention. But again, I'm just giving you the very unlikely scenarios, which is why when you come into the day, 13 games under 500 at the time, now just 12 games under 500, why exactly your playoff odds might be somewhere under 1%. Well, that is why, when you find yourself here. But, to kind of get back to what is going right now, because there are more than a few things, and that there have been some shows where I have put together some notes, and I've just been looking for, okay, all right, this guy's hurt. This guy's having a really tough time. This was a bad series. This particular game is an historic loss. We saw one of those earlier this summer. Don't want to dredge up bad memories of that, but you have to tell it like it is. You have to look at it for what it is and accept, unfortunately, in some cases, what it is not. But the Braves do have a few things going right here lately, and one of them is named Michael Harris II. And I think even a month ago that even the most optimistic supporters of Michael Harris II, of which there are quite a few, he's a talented player, he's a young player, he should be a big contributor for this Braves club, but it was a rough watch for about 90 games for Michael, right up until about the All-Star break. And when he got that little series in St. Louis right before the break and made his adjustment, opening up his stance some, raising his hands back up over his head and kind of hearkening back to the stance that he had in the minor leagues and when he first came up as a member of the Atlanta Braves way back in 2022, an eternity ago, to use that phrase again. But he just kind of got back to something familiar, and he started to find some results. And I'm going to get into the numbers, dig into some of the accomplishments of Michael Harris II and just how far he has come this season in 30-ish games to take a completely lost year, in which a lot of people, I think, were wondering, how exactly do you get Michael Harris back on track? Because it looks like it's completely broken. And as far as a results standpoint, it certainly was. But if you continue to work the process, continue to grind through it, continue to make the adjustments, and stay as insulated as you can be from everything that's going wrong in order to find the solutions for it, which I think Michael Harris did a very nice job of, then eventually I think talent does win out. And Michael Harris is a supremely talented player, but he had to wander through the wilderness for longer than you want to see anybody having to go through it. That was the story for Michael Harris II until about a month ago. And now it just seems like, hey, 2 hits a night, clutch home runs, all those kinds of things. Yep, back on the menu. And Michael Harris looks like a much more comfortable hitter. And in fact, I'm here to tell you that when I get into these stats, I'm going to make a case for why he may be the best hitter in baseball since the All-Star break. And that was not something I thought I would be saying when we went into the All-Star break. It was just, what can Michael Harris II do to save his season, turn his season around, and end it better than it started? And he's given you a resounding lesson in baseball, just being as unpredictable as virtually anything that you will find in life. Because just when you think you have crunched the numbers and you have figured it out and you know what should happen, well, baseball, it just does that thing where it just doesn't cooperate. Where a team that's supposed to win it all doesn't. A team that's supposed to lose doesn't. A player that's not necessarily cast to be in a certain moment comes through with the biggest hit or the biggest pitch or the biggest whatever it is of their career. And it's one of the things that makes baseball kind of beautiful, if I'm being honest. But that aside, it is really great to see what Michael Harris is doing. It's been really encouraging to see what we've seen from Hurston Waldrop and from Joey Wentz. And Marcell Ozuna has also turned his season around. We talked about that last week. He all of a sudden looks like the guy who was a major factor in the Braves' offensive success. And strangely enough, and we'll dig into all the offensive stuff here coming up in just a minute, but in terms of, what's been going right for the Braves, they've turned into one of the best offenses in the National League since the All-Star break. And I don't know that I could necessarily call that when you consider Ronald Acuña Jr. has missed a significant amount of time. Austin Riley has missed a significant amount of time. Matt Olson has not been hitting homers left, right, and center. He's been good. He's been fine. But it just hasn't been the usual suspects that you would look to and say, okay, if these guys are all swinging it well, I see the Braves offense being one of, if not the best in the National League, and the best one is the Milwaukee Brewers. And if you haven't checked out what they're doing lately, man, it's not losing, I'll tell you that. It's winning every which way possible as the Brewers continue to just torch their way to the best record in all of baseball. But we're not into the Brewers right now. We saw enough of the Brewers about a week or so ago at Truist Park when they swept the Braves amidst their franchise best winning streak that they've been on. But long story short, we have seen some things offensively from the Braves that at least remind you that the talent is there if they can find the results, which would be a result of the consistency they've been looking for all year. Maybe you start to feel a little bit better heading into the winter. Maybe you're able to get a little bit more laser focused on, okay, we like where these guys are, but we know what we need, and we know what positions we're going to go look for, and whether that's something in the middle infield, whether that's something in left field, whether that's figuring out your DH situation, those are all areas you can look at. And I've said this, and I'll continue to say this, and I'll say it again on this show a little bit later, I'm sure, that you just have to, I think, embrace everything being a conversation this winter if you're the Atlanta Braves. And that doesn't mean everybody's available for trades or anything like that. But what areas can you add to this club, and how can you accomplish that if you're Alex Anthopoulos? This is going to be a very big winter for him. But we're not going to skip ahead to the winter just yet. We are going to talk a little bit more about what's been going on lately for the Atlanta Braves and what needs to be happening going forward for the remainder of the season. I'm going to be joined by Stephen Tolbert of Hammer Territory a little bit later in this show. And we're also going to take a walk down memory lane for one of the greatest seasons in Braves franchise history. It was 1995. 30 years ago, the Braves won the World Series. I'll share a conversation I had with Ryan Klesko. He was on that team. That'll come your way on this edition of From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game and the Odyssey app.
From the Diamond with Grant McAuley. From the Diamond is brought to you by Window Nation. Get 2 windows free with every 2 you buy and pay nothing for 2 years on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Welcome back into From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. Live from the Kia Studios on a Sunday. We wrap up the weekend, which was a good one for the Atlanta Braves. A 3-game sweep over the Cleveland Guardians up at Progressive Field. And now they will come home and continue battling the AL Central. It'll be the Chicago White Sox. And I saw an interesting, social media post, stat, if you will, of what's been going on lately for the White Sox. And I was trying to remember if it was the last 2 months or since the start of July, maybe it's since the start of July, that the White Sox coming into the day had won just as many games as the New York Yankees. That's an insane thing to think about for 2 reasons. Number one, it's the New York Yankees. They have a monstrous payroll. They have huge expectations. They're supposed to be winning the American League East, and if not that, they're supposed to be factoring into it, most certainly. I wouldn't say that they're not factoring into it right now, though they're not in control of it, most certainly. But then you've got the White Sox, who kind of set the record for futility not too long ago, and it's kind of strange to see them for multiple months in a row winning at the same rate that the Yankees are. I say all that to let you know that the White Sox are coming into town for a 3-game series on Monday. You probably won't confuse them for the New York Yankees, who rolled through town just after the All-Star break, but they have been playing similarly, which is just a strange thing to think about. Meanwhile, 2025 has given us plenty of strange things to think about for the Atlanta Braves and some strange trends to try to figure out. But it's also given us a few things that I feel like you can feel maybe a little bit of optimism. Maybe it's guarded optimism. Let's call it guarded optimism for 2026 and beyond based on some trends and some performances that we've been seeing here this year and lately. Hurston Waldrep, I feel like, is the guy that he's gotten everyone's attention with the way that he's been pitching lately. A 1.04 ERA through 3 games, 2 of them starts, and obviously the other was the Speedway Classic, which was basically a start because you just threw him out there to open the game and throw 5 or 6 innings if possible, and that's exactly what he did in helping the Braves to win that one. But he's just dialed it in, really since the midway portion of the season, and he did so by having something that we talked about a week ago, which was an in-season adjustment courtesy of Sean Murphy. Because Sean Murphy was out early in the year when he was down in AAA Gwinnett. He was behind the plate for Hurston Waldrep. And Hurston Waldrep needed, I think, a little bit of guidance to kind of put everything together because I think the tools have been there. And there were some mechanical changes that he also made that date back to over the winter. Those are also important. But I feel like from an arsenal perspective, I mean, you have to have those weapons. And we heard about the splitter a lot. I mean, from draft day on, we heard about Hurston Waldrep's splitter and how that's a major league ready pitch. That's a good starting point. But you also have to be able to execute. You have to have fastball command, number one, and you've got to have some good secondaries. The splitter is a great one, but what else was he going to use? And I think that Sean Murphy helped him kind of round that out because Murph, in catching him, thought, you ought to throw your sinker more. And by the time that Hurston Waldrep was able to, I think, incorporate that into his arsenal of pitches, he was able to start finding some real consistency. And that was really what he was able to do to, I think, finally get the Braves' attention and really earn some opportunity to come up and help them at the big league level. If you look at what he was doing over his final 7 starts in AAA Gwinnett, it was a 1.99 ERA. And sure, the walks are still there, but 36 punch-outs in 40 2/3 innings. And you just felt like hitters were having a hard time dealing with his arsenal because the sinker was such an effective pitch, and because he has that splitter, now you take a little bit of pressure, I feel like, off the fastball because you can sink it a lot more. And that was one of the things that I think was kind of the key to success, if you will, for Hurston Waldrep. And he's making the most of his opportunity right now to kind of pitch his way into the Braves' plans. Not that he wasn't before, but if you were to kind of line up and do that Braves depth chart, especially back on opening day, of who was going to get starts for this club, and in what order, if some guys went down, I think Hurston Waldrep was probably about where you found him when he came up this year in July. He was not really ready for that opening day test, obviously, but where was he going to fit in? Well, after several other iterations of starting pitchers and rotations, because you lost Reynaldo Lopez, and you lost A.J. Smith-Shawver, and then you lost Chris Sale and Spencer Schwellenbach in consecutive weeks, and then you lost Grant Holmes in July, because when it rains, it absolutely pours on this rotation this year. But Waldrep coming up and doing what he's done has been one of the most impressive things that we've seen thus far this year. So on top of Waldrep, you got Joey Wentz. Again on Saturday, 6 innings of 1-run ball. His only bad outing in a Braves uniform came against the Milwaukee Brewers, and I think really inside of that game, there were a couple of plays that if they were made, I think he was a little bit unlucky. And I'm not just saying that to make Joey Wentz's one bad game all of a sudden become a good game. I mean, the numbers are what they are. But everything this guy has done, the composure and the ability to cover these innings, important innings for the Braves, have to have you at least, again, cautiously optimistic about what this guy could do in the Braves rotation. And we'll see where he might factor in because the Braves have, I believe, up to 4 years of team control on Joey Wentz, which seems like a wild thing because you traded him away in 2019, and he debuted, I believe in 2022. So he's pitched parts of the last 3-4 seasons in the big leagues, but he had just over a year of service time. So you've got some time to go for Joey Wentz if he does pitch his way into your plans. That may not be in rotation. He may be a long man, a swing man that could help you out in the bullpen, cover multiple innings, and just utilize the arsenal that has been working so well for him thus far. And we might see how that all plays out. And it gives you hope that over this next 5-6 weeks, he continues to just post and have himself ready for what could be a very big opportunity in 2026 to help round out this rotation with not just depth, but quality depth. And that's something that the Braves have had tested this year. And there's no way that any club out there is going to be able to take its 5 starters from opening day, lose them to the 60-day IL, and have an operational plan B, a secondary rotation that's just somehow automatically going to be able to pick up where the old one left off. We knew that was going to be a test, and it most certainly has been. And when you look at it right now, Hurston Waldrop and Joey Wentz are your 2 most effective starters here lately. Because what's been going on with Spencer Strider has been, unfortunately, I think just part of the process of Spencer trying to get himself back to where he was pre that surgery and all of the time that he missed and how much that takes away when you are away for that long from being able to come back and find that consistency. But Spencer Strider has definitely been the one troublesome part of the Braves' second half rotation because you put the injuries off in one place where you do everything that you can to try to figure out and cover those innings. But Spencer Strider was supposed to be the guy that, okay, we've got Chris Sale, we've got Spencer Schwellenbach, we've got Reynaldo Lopez, we've got Grant Holmes, we've got, all down the list, and we're going to add Spencer Strider back. And for a while, I feel like things were going pretty well for him. But then on not this road trip, but the previous one, the stop in Kansas City, it just seemed like after a nice 9-start or so run for Spencer, he just wasn't fooling the Royals. And it just felt like he wasn't quite locating, wasn't quite executing the way that he, I know, expects to and the way that makes him so effective because his fastball right now, we know, is not what it was pre-surgery. And he's going to, I think, have to continue to go through the process of building himself back up to try to regain that mile or 2 an hour at least of velocity that is going to make it feel like he's finally been able to maybe turn the hands of time back a little bit and feel like himself again. Because Strider, the last couple have been really rough. The one against Milwaukee at home, 4 2/3 innings, 11 hits, that's a career high, 5 earned runs, couple of home runs, a walk and 6 strikeouts. There was some swing and miss in that outing. But the Brewers clearly had him dialed up for 11 hits and 4 2/3 innings. That's not a Spencer Strider line there. And then it got worse last time out against the Mets. 4+ innings, 8 hits, 8 earned runs, couple of walks, only 2 strikeouts. That's a career low for a Spencer Strider start, by the way. And 3 home runs allowed as well. And these were not cheap home runs. These were home runs on mistake pitches by Spencer Strider right in the middle of the zone. And they were going a long way, and they were not coming back. And you hear Spencer after each one of these outings, I've got to execute better. He really takes it on. There's no, well, but this and but that, and they're the hitter and tip your cap, and no, it's just none of that. He has a higher expectation of what he needs to do as a competitor because he's done it before, and he's trying to find his way to do that again. So this is where I feel like the work continues for Spencer Strider. But some of the trends that we're seeing are obviously troublesome, and the homer-prone Spencer Strider that we've seen lately, I want to get inside the numbers and really figure out what it is that's not working in Spencer's arsenal. Now, his four-seam fastball in 2022, when he was a rookie with a 2.60 ERA and 200 strikeouts and 130 innings, opponents hit 201 against that fastball, and it averaged 98.2 miles per hour. So not a surprise that it was an elite pitch, maybe the best fastball in Major League Baseball. And he used it again in 2023 to great effect. Opponents hit 256 against him, 17 homers, a little bit homer-prone, but he was still averaging 97.2 miles per hour in his fastball. I'm going to throw out last year because it was only 2 starts, and that sample really, I don't think is indicative of much. But this year, his fastball is averaging 95.6 miles per hour. Opponents are batting .291 against it, and he's given up 7 home runs on that pitch. And his elite put-away pitch, the slider, he's already given up 6 home runs on his slider this year, which is more than he has given up in any other season against that slider. In fact, lifetime, he had given up 6 home runs on a slider coming into the season. So I kind of throw all that out there to say the pitches just aren't executed to the same level. They're not biting, I think, to the same level in terms of that slider. It's still a very good pitch, but it hasn't been elite, and he has made some mistakes on it. And then you look at the fastball, and without that extra couple of miles an hour, and that Spencer Strider fastball, you'll remember, the one that is so tantalizing, he gets great extension, and he still gets that. But that fastball is not taking off at the top of the zone anymore. Because if you are able to execute there, and then throw that slider that falls off the table, that's what made Spencer Strider, at least for a while, the greatest strikeout pitcher in Major League Baseball. Now, can he get back there? I think that he can. And I'm going to tell you what exactly I believe it's going to take for him to get it back there. He's going to have to continue to grind it out every fifth or sixth day, however the Braves want to deploy their rotation for the remainder of this season. He'll take the lumps that he needs to, but more importantly, he will take the lessons that come from that and continue to make, I feel like, those adjustments to understand where he is now on his journey as a Major League pitcher. And then what I think is going to be the most valuable thing for him is going to be a normal offseason. A normal offseason not spent rehabbing, where he is able to work out, where he is able to lift. Because, look, Spencer Strider, I don't know if you've seen him, he's a very well put-together pitcher. His physicality is a big part of what made him successful. When you're going through an arm rehab, you're not able to concentrate as much on those kinds of things because your number one focus is getting your arm back and healthy again. And yes, he took care of the rest of his body. I'm not saying he didn't, but now he can just have a complete focus on what he needs to get from this offseason, from that strength and power perspective. And all these innings that he's throwing, I think are all valuable to build that foundation, that good base, for being able to take on an entire workload of a full 162-game season for players and a 30-ish start schedule for a starting pitcher. I think it's all just part of that process. And it's not easy to be patient when you know what Spencer Strider has been and can be, and when you're seeing what's just not happening right now. We've gotten glimpses, I feel like, of the old Spencer Strider. You still see some fastballs up there, 97, 98 miles an hour, but you're just not seeing it as consistently as you used to. And I don't think it's just all about the velocity. It really has, to me, more to do with the execution of the pitches and the ability to have the confidence that he is completely where he wants to be over the course of a nice winter coming into spring training, where he can just concentrate on being a pitcher again, not somebody who's rehabbing a major injury. So those are some thoughts on Spencer Strider, the starting rotation. I've got a lot more of those. We got to talk about what Chris Sale was doing, another rehab start for him, a good one for AAA Gwinnett. But when we come back, I'm going to have Stephen Tolbert of Hammer Territory join me. We'll continue that Spencer Strider conversation. We'll also talk a little bit about the red-hot Michael Harris and also the big winter that is ahead for the Braves. And I've talked about this a lot on the show. I think it's the most important that Alex Anthopoulos has had since he took over this job. Stephen Tolbert joins me next. This is From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game and the Odyssey app.
I love baseball. Now back to more Grant McAuley and From the Diamond. Brought to you by Mark Spain Real Estate. Get a guaranteed offer from Mark Spain Real Estate. 855-299-SOLD. On Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Welcome back into From the Diamond with Grant McAuley here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game, live from the Kia Studios on a Sunday, closing out the weekend for the Braves, who have another series win under their belt, and now will return home to take on the Chicago White Sox starting on Monday. We'll talk a little bit more about that series coming up, but I do want to kind of parse through a couple of the big stories and the big conversations for the Braves here in the second half. To help me do that, I've got Stephen Tolbert of Hammer Territory joining me right now on the WadeFord.com hotline. Well, Stephen, I appreciate you making some time for me. It's always great to chat with you. I follow along on the Hammer Territory feed. I know that all of us that cover the Braves or talk about the Braves probably haven't had the season that we've wanted to thus far, but there have been a few, at least I would say, encouraging aspects of the second half. What do you think?
Yeah, listen, they're playing better. I mean, they are. There's quite a bit of irony in when they had Chris Sale, Spencer Swellenbach, Spencer Strider, and Grant Holmes all pitching like phenomenally well in June. And they couldn't win a game. They had lost 7 in a row at one point. They were 10 games under 500. And now we have Joey Wentz and Hurston Waldrop and Eric Fede, and we had Carrasco there for a minute, and now they're hot. That's baseball, man. It's such a weird sport, and we try to cover it, and we try to make sense of it and explain what's happening. But quite honestly, sometimes you just can't explain it. Like, it's just It's such a weird sport. The offense has gotten substantially hotter. They've got more than one or two guys who are hitting at the same time, which hasn't happened really all season. And that's probably the biggest reason is you've seen the lineup finally, Profar got hot. Ozuna got hot again. Ronnie's back. Matt Olson's been good, obviously. Baldwin. Even some of the guys, Michael Harris, of course, is the big one. Yeah. But yeah, the offense started looking more like the offense we expected, and it's led to some wins.
Yeah, and you certainly need to score runs, and that, I think, is probably one of the more maddening parts about where the Braves find themselves right now, because they have gotten hot, they are scoring some runs, they are winning some games, heck, they're winning some series, which didn't seem like a thing the Braves were going to be able to do for about a month or so in a row there, and now you kind of look back on all those one-run losses and all that great pitching that you did get, and you just think, man, another run or two here or there, this is a very different season. And no, Alex Anthopoulos is one of the people that looks at that run differential. I mean, we all do. And you think, okay, well, with this run differential, shouldn't the Braves be more like the Cardinals or maybe more like the Reds than being like the Colorado Rockies or the Pittsburgh Pirates or the Washington Nationals and some of the clubs that they were hanging around with? So it's the more you try to explain it, the more you try to figure it out, the weirder sometimes a baseball season can certainly get. But you brought up one name in particular, and I figure we ought to start with him because he's really the guy that I think you needed to see something from, and we're getting the most from in the second half, and that's Michael Harris II. You look at the first 90 games of his season, there was a case to be made that the Braves had themselves a legitimate Michael Harris problem. And so far as, do you let him grind through it at the big league level? Do you think about sending him to the minors? What message does that send if you do send him down there, and will he be able to figure it out there? So Michael went from being a really, really big question mark for the Braves to a really big exclamation point in the second half by hitting close to 400, by slugging homers, and by doing all the things that he has done. So I guess I'll couch this question this way. How big of a relief is it to see Michael Harris on the hot streak that he's on right now?
Yeah, it's such a weird thing because we've seen guys who are second half players before. I remember famously like Mark Teixeira was always a massive second half player. And like he rarely made all-star teams because of it, because he was just such a big second half player. And I guess this is what Mike is. Mike's just taken it to a level, an extreme level that I'm not really seen before. What he's done this season, being honestly one of the worst offensive players in baseball in the first half to honestly one of the best offensive players in baseball in the second half. I don't know what you do with that. Like we talked about this on one of our last shows. Like I really don't know. Like I don't know if it's sustainable to be this extreme. I think you got to find some consistency in the first half, not even to this level, but just be like a league average player for 3 months and then do this. And then you're a monster. But it is amazing to see him hit this well. And the underlying metrics are still a little concerning. There's still not a lot of walks. He still swings at a lot of pitches. But what he's doing now is when he gets pitches in the zone, he's doing maximum damage. He's not fouling them off. He's not swinging and missing. He's putting them in the seats. He's putting them in the gaps. That's really the main difference we've seen in this stretch. So I don't know what you make of it. I really don't. I'd actually be curious to hear your opinion of it because I'm of two minds where I'm extremely excited because the talent has always been there. Like he's one of the most talented dudes in the league, quite honestly.
Yeah.
But between the lack of walks, between the massive inconsistency first half to second half, I don't know. I really don't know what to make of it. It's awesome to see right now, but if you ask me how it's going to look in 2026, I honestly don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the question has been the roller coaster, or the seasons have been roller coasters for Michael Harris. I will say a couple of things. Number one, if you look at 2023 and 2024, there was a stint on the injured list, a lengthy one that kind of derailed the first half of his season. Particularly, I felt like 24. He was starting to get hot, then he strained the hamstring. Then when he got back in the second half, he kind of picked up where he left off. Now, 23 was the interesting one where it just seemed like he had the back issue, couldn't get comfortable. It might have still been bothering him. Then all of a sudden, he gets a pep talk from Marcell Ozuna, and away he goes over the final 90 games. I think OPSing over 900, batting .335, and looking a lot like the guy we're seeing right now. So I don't know if there's necessarily an explanation for it, but there's certainly something to be said for finding some consistency, and I'm with you. I do feel like while he is an aggressive hitter and while he does swing the bat a lot, he's not making as many mistakes, and he's not going outside the zone quite as much right now. And so hitters, and now people are wondering, well, why would anybody throw him a strike? Well, that's how the game works. You do try to get this guy out. You can't just give him the treatment of just not throwing him anything good, because I guess he probably would take the walks in that case, but putting all of that kind of anecdotal stuff aside, I feel like he's able to get more comfortable at the plate, clearly changing his stance back to his early rookie year. And that's the other interesting thing, Stephen, is that people are like, well, why didn't he go back to this stance earlier? Well, because he had 3 pretty good years in the big leagues with some of his biggest success using the stance that he was using in the first half of 2025. But ultimately, he had to go back to the drawing board at some point, and getting back to a familiar stance, I think, may have just been the thing, whether it was coincidence or otherwise, that began to unlock him and make him comfortable. That's the number one thing I would say about Michael Harris, is that he's definitely gotten more comfortable at the plate, because I don't know if you could look much more uncomfortable than he did in the first half.
Yeah, and listen, the thing about the batting stance is people remember this. If you go back and watch Acuña's rookie year, he had hands above his head.
Yep.
He hit very much like Michael hit when he first came up, and they lowered him. They lowered him down to his chest. And obviously, Acuña is one of the best players in baseball. So I understand, like, when Mike lowered his hands originally, he had success. And it's probably hard to go back. It's probably hard to just say, you know what, I'm gonna ignore all that and go back to what I was. Matt Olson, similarly, has moved his hands since being with the Braves. It's actually a pretty common thing. So I don't blame Mike for being hesitant to go back to what he was doing in his rookie year. That is notable, though, that he has changed his stance, he's changed his hands, he's changed his swing. That might lend itself to more consistency. Like, it's a real data point. Like, once he made this adjustment, his numbers went up. It's not just the randomness of baseball of small samples. So there might be some actual signal in there amongst all the noise, and we're just gonna have to see. I mean, we're gonna, for 2026, what kind of player is Mike in the first half is going to be a massive question.
Chatting with Stephen Tolbert of Hammer Territory. That's part of the Foul Territory Podcast Network. He joins me on the WadeFord.com hotline here on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. Another guy that you need to see something from, I think, down the stretch in the vein of the consistency is Spencer Strider. I felt like the first 5 outings of the year for him, and of course you have to throw in an IL stint, which was ill-timed, as if there's ever a good time for that. Then he got himself on what I felt like was the right track, and now here lately, and really to me, starting with the Kansas City outing, just started getting a lot less swing and miss. Hitters started really keying in and not missing when he made mistakes over the plate. That's a universal in Major League Baseball. If you make too many mistakes over the heart of the plate, you're going to get hurt. I know that Spencer's missing a couple of miles an hour on that fastball from a couple of years ago, but that is a pitch that has gone from one of his biggest weapons to right now, perhaps his biggest liability. What have you seen out of Spencer Strider here over the past at least couple of weeks that, A, I'm sure has you concerned, and B, how much work do you think it's going to take to fix what it is that's ailing Spencer Strider right now?
Yeah, listen, it's not fair to judge him completely until we see a full offseason where he's healthy and can train. He's a big guy who, if you look at Spencer, he's built like a statue. Like he does a lot of workouts. He gets a lot of his velocity from his lower half. He's talked about that before. And so we need to let him get through a full offseason, a normal offseason where he can lift weights, he can do his whole program, and then see what he looks like in the spring. I think that's fair. But it's also fair to say this version of Spencer is probably going to need some adjustments to be a better, I don't know if we're ever going to get like 2022, 2023 Spencer Strider again, where he's arguably the best pitcher on the planet on a per inning basis. The numbers kind of support that. But if this is what he has to work with, if he's now kind of a 94, 95, 96 guy, and I'm not saying he is, because again, we got to give him an offseason. But if he is that, he's going to have to make adjustments. And Spencer is an insanely competitive dude. He's a very smart guy. He's very deliberate. You can tell when he gives answers, he's not just giving boilerplate stuff. Like he's giving you real answers. He's going to figure it out. He's going to probably have to change. He's always been a high fastball usage guy. He's always been like 60% fastball usage guy. When you're throwing 100, that's one thing. When you're throwing 95, I don't know if you can do that. You might have to live off the slider a little more. Plenty of guys have done that as they've lost velocity. One thing we talked about on the show is I don't know that Spencer has ever had to have like premium fastball location and command because he's always thrown it 100 miles an hour. And that might be an adjustment he has to make. I went back and watched the Mets game. Those 2 massive homers he gave up were literally like 95-mile-an-hour fastballs right down the middle.
Yeah.
And like you said, you just can't pitch there. You can get away with it at 100. You cannot get away with it at 95. You just can't. That's a massive difference. So fastball command, fastball location. Does he change up the pitch mix? And when he comes back to spring training next year, what does he look like? Does some of the fastball velocity come back? Listen, that's a major question. People kind of gloss over it. You lose 2 or 3 miles an hour on your fastball. It's a massive, massive deal. There's a reason everybody in baseball chases velocity. It's a big deal. So when he comes back next spring, does he come back with any more velocity? Can he get it back up to even like a 97, 98, 99 guy consistently? Even that would help. So it is a lot of questions. I do think it's fair to give him an offseason, but I mean, it's a massive deal. He's starting next year. He makes $20 million a year for like 3 years. And that's a huge chunk of change for the Braves, for any team, but really the Braves, who don't really go much higher than that on a per player basis. So this is a massive storyline for next year.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I think that from the monetary standpoint, how the Braves, allot their dollars and who they allot them to obviously is going to be a talking point. So let me kind of wrap up with this in our time on this particular conversation. And that is, and I've talked about this a lot, I know you guys have talked about it a lot, what is ahead for the Braves this winter? I mean, the spending is something that I think drives people crazy to talk about because you hear a lot of things over the course of the winter, and I know I hear them because I'm on the calls that, hey, payroll should go up. We expect it to go up. We've never been told no, et cetera, et cetera. And then you go through an offseason where you didn't spend more money and you weren't necessarily able to address some areas that came back to hurt you, like the bullpen. You cannot, plan for 5 starting pitchers going on the 60-day IL. I'm going to put that in a box off to the side because it's a totally different conversation. Your biggest offseason signing, though, got himself suspended for 80 games and now quizzically is getting the most plate appearances of anybody on the team, which is a thing that I've been questioning the long-term viability of that. But I'm going to also put that in a second box off to the side. And let me just ask you this. From your vantage point, from what we've seen from the Braves this year, from what we know of the Braves year over year annually, their competitive nature and their ability to be a contender, what is it going to take over the course of the winter to get back to where they want to be, to meet those lofty expectations, both internally and externally? Because it feels like, to me, again, the most important, the most pivotal winter for Alex Anthopoulos since he took this job.
Yeah, no, that's 100% true. I mean, Alex has never had to deal with a team that's going to finish where this team is going to finish. Even if they get hot down the stretch, they're not making the playoffs. Their playoff odds are less than 1%, and he's never had to deal with that. And so, just on that alone, this of course is going to be a massive offseason. And one area I think the Braves have wandered a little too far in for my liking is they've kind of quietly built a very high risk rotation. They have a lot of arms that have a lot of questions. I mean, Chris Sale, is got a laundry list of injuries. It's always usually a freak thing, but like it happens a lot. Spencer Strider's had multiple major elbows. Ronaldo Lopez now has a shoulder. Grant Holmes has got this Tommy John thing lingering. Now Spencer Schwallenbach has got this elbow thing. AJ Smith-Shawver is out for next year. Like, they just have a very high risk rotation. And I was really hoping last offseason they would get Nathan Eovaldi, just for the durability, just for the stability of it. There's just so much injury variance in their rotation these days that I think that's something they're going to have to address. I don't know. Listen, they've got some long-term money locked into some of these guys. I don't know how you do it. You're going to have to be creative, but we saw last year, even when the offense was terrible last year, the Braves made the playoffs because their pitching was fantastic.
Yeah.
And if you look at the history of the Braves, it's usually built on really good starting pitching. And keeping that pitching healthy has been a real challenge for this group. And a lot of it is just they have a lot of injury risk kind of baked into the rotation. So yes, getting the bullpen addressed, the offense, the maddening inconsistency of the offense are all key things. But I think you got to find some durability and stability in this rotation. And I don't know if it can be with this specific group of players. They might have to get creative and try to get a couple other guys in who can last for 6-7 months of a season, because frankly, they've had a hard time, even before this year of getting their starters all the way to October and through October healthy. They just haven't done it in like 4 years.
Steven, I appreciate all of your time. Let the folks know how they can connect with you and, of course, how they can get connected with Hammer Territory.
Yeah, Hammer Territory, part of the Foul Territory Network. We're anywhere you get podcasts, Apple, Spotify. We record typically, 3 or 4 times a week, all the way through. It's a 12-month podcast, a lot like Grant. Grant's been on multiple times. So yeah, it's me, Scott, Brad, and Sean. And for better or for worse, wins or losses, we cover the team just like Grant. So we appreciate all the support.
More Braves and baseball talk is on the way next here on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game and the Odyssey app.
I love baseball. Now back to more Grant McAuley and From the Diamond. Brought to you by Mark Spain Real Estate. Get a guaranteed offer from Mark Spain Real Estate. 855-299-SOLD. On Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Welcome back into From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. Want to switch gears and talk about something fun that's going to be happening at Truist Park this week, and that is the 30th anniversary of the 1995 World Series champion Atlanta Braves. That season, obviously that title, the crowning moment of all those great teams we watched during that decade. And I'm looking forward to chatting with members of that team when I get a chance to on Friday night at the ballpark. But a few years ago, I got to catch up with Ryan Klesko on the 25th anniversary of the World Series championship team of 1995 to get his thoughts on where he fit as a young up-and-coming player on a team that very much wanted to finally not just get to the World Series, but win this thing, his Hall of Fame teammates, his Hall of Fame manager, and, of course, the reflections on winning that World Series and what it means to him. I want to share that conversation with Braves outfielder / first baseman Ryan Klesko right here, right now on From the Diamond. What was it like playing for Bobby Cox, and how did he help you fit in as you got your feet wet at the big leagues and maybe instilled a little bit of confidence in you as your career grew?
Well, it's one of those things where, I was in a different situation because, there was all these veterans around me and I was fighting for playing time. So early on was stress for me. I was always fighting for more time. I was always wanting to play more. A couple of years, I think I led the team in home runs or was the top 2 or 3 guys, but I had, 150 less at bats than everybody else. And so I was kind of constantly, trying to fight to get in there more, but you only got so much you can do. You got to pay your dues, kid. You got to pay your dues, So you got all these all-stars around you. Then you got these veterans they bring in from the Yankees and, or from wherever they came from. So you kind of had to bite your tongue and then just put in your time and put up your numbers and slowly grind. And that was hard for me. And, at times, Bobby and I got into it. I'd be hot at the bat and I wouldn't play for 2 days in a row, maybe 3. Mm-hmm. And I would go in and, we kind of butted heads on that. But, again, he respected that because he knew that I was trying to get in there every day. Or not every day, but most of the time. And so he understood where I was coming from, and I understood where he was coming from in certain things. And when it comes down to it, it's not about me or him. It's about winning. So you got to slowly prove, and you got to work your butt off and go from there. So there's stress about winning, and, that team being put together and spent a lot of money on it. There was stress. When Chipper and Hobby and I came in, hey, this is our first go-around. Some of the veterans of that, they're like, hey, we got to do this. This is our third one, We lost the first 2, and so the younger guys didn't feel that because we weren't there. We didn't have that. Of course, being nervous, that's a whole nother thing. I mean, whatever you would think, people ask me, what's it like going to the World Series? It's like you dreamed of, when you were a kid. I mean, it's surreal. Everybody handles the pressure a little bit different, but you got to slow yourself down. Just like I think Joe Morgan was saying there, the first couple of games I didn't get any hits. And he's like, what are you going to do? I said, I got to cut my swing down. I'm just over swinging. I'm too jacked up. I'm chasing pitches that I don't normally chase, swinging at bad pitches. I've got to slow down and start driving the ball up the other way and up the middle to get my swing back. And, they see it because, I think 90% of the pitches they were throwing me were off-speed pitches early on. And then I went opposite field with that home run, and they started trying to pitch me in a little bit later. But, just there's so much stuff going through your mind as a young player or even a veteran player, and there's so much adrenaline that you got to try to get back within yourself because you try to do too much. And when you try to do too much in baseball, it's not good.
As things kind of came back together for the Braves and all the baseball, ending the 94 season with a strike that dragged all the way into the spring of 95, then all of a sudden it seemed like, hey, let's do this thing. Let's get back to baseball. What were your feelings when you guys finally got word that, hey, it's time for the big leaguers to get back to work and start the 95 baseball season?
There was a lot, there was a lot of heat, on some of the guys, and, DJ and Glavine being real vocal, and there were some people, give them a hard time in some of the papers and stuff. But, those guys took care of it well and did as professionally as they could have. And we understood the fans were a little bit frustrated. So there was a lot of animosity about that and just slowly gaining the fans' trust again. And I remember this. I remember we were driving down the highway and got pulled over. I was speeding and, guy pulled up my license and the guy's like, oh, you played for the Atlanta Braves? I'm thinking, oh, yeah, I'm going to get out of this ticket, right? And he comes back. Full ticket, and I think he might have added a couple miles an hour to that thing.
Really?
Yeah, and he hands me the ticket and said, shouldn't you guys be playing ball right about now, son?
Oh, wow.
Gave me the ticket. See you later. So he wasn't too happy we were on strike either. But I am here. I'm thinking, hey, I'm just a rookie. I'm just doing what I'm told to do, What am I supposed to do? So I look back at that and laugh, but I was like, really? He's going to give me a ticket? I'm out of work. I'm broke.
I tell you, though, that's a great story, though. When you look back on it all these years later, it's just kind of that moment in time of where things were at that time. And let's get into the postseason run because that's where you guys had an awful lot of fun, of course. You take the NL East crown, you beat the Rockies in the NLDS, you beat the Reds in the NLCS, and that's followed by an immediate 2-0 lead in the World Series. What was the mindset as the series moved back to Cleveland? Because as you mentioned, there were guys who had come close to winning this thing before and hadn't been able to do it yet. Did you sense any added pressure or sense of urgency or anything else as you guys were taking the series up north to Cleveland?
Well, I mean, you always know things, momentum change, and we learned that later on, especially when we're playing the Yankees. But
Right.
Any game, any momentum, a big change, anything, you just want to keep that out of your mind and just grind it out and play hard. And here you are up 2-0, and then you lose Game 3 in Cleveland. Tough game. Made some mistakes, made some base running mistakes, or made some errors. But that's what happens. Sometimes just that extra adrenaline, you being in the World Series, and you try to do too much with that ground ball, you come up a little bit too soon, or you overthrow the ball. You got some of the guys in the dugout going into the bathrooms throwing up between innings because they're so nervous. I mean, that's real stuff you got to deal with.
Everybody's going to deal with this stress in different ways, but when it came down to it, things were going pretty well as far as the way you want to start a World Series. Greg Maddux, Tom Glavine pick up their wins, and then you guys move it back up to Cleveland. For you, that's when the series really gets cranked up. You had a memorable run against the Indians, 3 homers in those 6 games. Did it sink into you, or when did it sink in, that you were hitting these big home runs in the World Series in these big moments? As a kid, that I'm sure you dreamed about that quite a bit, even all the way through the minor leagues, and maybe even the night before some of these happened.
Yeah, I mean, it's surreal, it really is. And you think back, and I know I was panicking a little bit. I've felt I don't remember it, bad now, but I mean, obviously, doing that interview, they're like, well, the first 2 games you might not be happy with yourself if you didn't get any hits, but I'm trying to tell everybody, look, you're facing Orel Hershiser, Dennis Martinez. They're making nasty pitches on you. You're facing Cy Young Award winners in the World Series just about every time you turn around. And just like those guys, they're facing Greg Maddux, Tom Glavine, John Smoltz. And I think I looked up Manny Ramirez and Jim Tomei, and that's between the two hadn't had but 1 or 2 hits the whole series so far. Now, they're just Maddux and Glavine were just carving those guys up. And good pitching not usually shuts down good hitting. And that's what happened in this Cleveland series. They had a bomb squad. I mean, they're talking about, that team hit like 290, the highest batting average for a team in, 50-something years.
Yeah.
But just remember, they weren't facing those guys. So they ain't going to do that. And when I think the Reds hit like 116 against us that prior series when we swept the Reds before going to the World Series. And tell you what, though, looking back, you ask any one of our players, which was the toughest team that we played, and we battled the Colorado Rockies. That team was a bomb squad. They can hit. The pitchers, a lot of our starters did not like pitching in Colorado. They didn't have the confidence. That team gave us a hard time. We had to come back. Chipper hit a big home run there. We had to battle for everyone in Colorado. That team gave us a run. And remember, that's only a 5-game series.
Right. No, it certainly was, and it was kind of setting the stage by fighting through those games. Of course, you mentioned you swept the Reds. You get up to Cleveland. By the time you come home, you're up 3-2 in the World Series. Tom Glavine's on the mound. You mentioned what he's capable of. Greg Maddux is capable of. How much confidence did the team have with him on the mound for that night, for that game, and what was it like to watch him work in Game 6?
Oh, it was amazing. You could tell, when Tommy's on, you can tell right away. And most of the time, if a team got to Tommy, he's in the first inning. And I don't know, he tried so many things over the years, throwing a longer bullpen, throwing a shorter bullpen. But a lot of the really good pitchers, a lot of big-time pitchers like that usually got in trouble. Usually it was the first inning. I think maybe just because they were trying to jump on the fastballs early on and then vice versa, whatever. I think Randy Johnson, some of these guys, if they got hit, usually got hit early. But if Tommy got you and he was feeling it and he had the feel for it, that late movement and that changeup working, it didn't matter. And just watching back, it's funny because I honestly can't tell you a whole lot about other than just a couple of things. It's been so long ago, so I'm enjoying watching this, exactly what happened. But he was on and he was feeling it, and he just wanted a run or two. And we did the interview the other day and talked about, hey, just give me one, guys. I just need one, And they asked me if I heard that, and I was like, well, really, I didn't because it's so loud there, and there's a lot of noise in the dugout. I know a lot of the players heard it. But, I might have been on the other end of the dugout, or I might have been down in the tunnel or something trying to get some coffee or something. But who knows? But that was pretty cool, that game and the way he pitched. And Orel Hershiser and Dennis Martinez, those guys pitched their butts off. I mean, even Kenny Hill, he's nasty. We faced good pitching. You look at those offenses, and I know that some of the announcers are talking about our offense wasn't that good. I mean, I was like laughing. I was like, what do you mean we weren't that good? Look at that lineup.
I don't buy those comments. And it's funny because now we know the kind of season that you guys had, A, and then B, who some of these players are. It was a little bit strange to hear that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think they were just looking at our average was down a little bit there. I think our team average is like, 252 or 262. And that's even surprised me because, Marquise, I think, played a little bit hurt that year, but he's usually like a 280 guy. Javi Lopez, 280 guy. DJ, myself, I think I was a career 280 guy, 279, 280 guy. I mean, I was like, what? I think I hit 310 that year, but I was like, why is this? And then look back, we had Blauser was hurt, and then Belliard and they were looking at Belliard, and Belliard's average was down, and then they're looking at some stuff. I was like, that's not normal, but we had a really good hitting team. But their team, people didn't even know. They didn't know who Manny Ramirez and Jim Tomei were. Are you kidding me? And Barga had put up some big numbers, but Tomei and Ramirez are just young. Like, it was just like me and Javi Lopez. No one really knew it. And then you look back now, it's like they were carving up Manny and Jim, almost that whole series.
Yeah, and they most definitely were. And for Tom Glavine, carving everybody up in Game 6, of course, he said he just needed a run or two. Well, he got that run courtesy of David Justice, who had kind of gotten on the fans' bad side with some of his comments during the World Series. David was even getting booed before he hit that Game 6 home run. Did you hear his comments before the game or at any point? And what did you guys think when he came through in the clutch with that huge home run?
You know what? Being that you mentioned that, I know that there's some strike comments with Tommy and DJ and stuff like that. Thinking back, I think David had mentioned something about the fans back from Cleveland. Cleveland was loud. The fans were going crazy. And this was our third World Series. And, in Georgia, people have a tendency to be laid back a little bit, right? And that's just the Southern mentality. And I think David was just calling them out a little bit, say, hey, we're in the World Series. The commentators were saying something about that Atlanta wasn't really that loud. And I think DJ was just calling them out like, hey, let's get excited. And I think he might have went about it the wrong way, but, they didn't like it too much, I promise you.
Yeah, well, they did love him after that home run, though. What were your memories of that? Because, like you said, if Glavine's dialed in, you got him to run. It seemed to be all he needed.
Yeah, I mean, who would have thought? With these big offensive lineups, in my opinion, going back, both teams had it. Even Lemke was a playoff machine. He got hits in all, years, but you would never think the games would be that tight. But then again, you look back, so, okay, the way these guys were pitching when they were on, Mad Dog, when he was on, it was 1 or 2 runs or less. Same thing with Glav. When he's on, it's going to be, they're not going to get more than a couple runs. And then, but with that Cleveland offense, man, you make any mistakes, you open the door a little bit, they just go. I mean, to be honest with you, I can't believe we didn't have a lot of big. You look back now, the big offenses and the big names. I can't believe that we didn't have like 1 or 2 big blowout games where it was like 10-9 or a 12-8 or something like that with these big offenses. And Albert Bell hitting 50 home runs and Byerga hitting 340. But our pitching shut them down. I mean, you look back at now, it got Hall of Famer. Of course, didn't get any runs, but they still had to make their pitches in that situation against probably, honestly, one of the best lineups I've ever seen in my life. You look back at the numbers and those guys, Mad Dog Lav, and Smoltz, he didn't have a feel for the ball that one night, he said, but he still pitched pretty good. His slider was on. He had some bad breaks, in my opinion. He didn't really hit the ball that hard on him. He had some CNI singles and some bad breaks, but I thought they all pitched good.
Yeah, well, Glavine took care of the first 8 innings in Game 6. Mark Wohlers closed it out. Marquise Grissom runs down the final out in left center field at Atlanta Fulton County Stadium. Ryan, can you walk me through what the 9th inning felt like from your vantage point and, of course, the celebration that followed?
I mean, that right there. So I think going in, I broke up the double play. I tore the ligament on my left thumb, retore it, which I hurt it in the year. So I'm playing with a torn ligament on my left hand. I think I get a couple of bats, and I come out once we get the lead. Man, I know that I was probably going to have to get surgery in the offseason or just be out for a long time, but normal situation, I'm done. But it's the 6th game of the World Series. You got to play, right? So you tape it up, you take some Advil or whatever they gave me, and you take as much as you can and get it out for as long as you can. And I was in a terrible amount of pain. We get the lead. I come out for defense. So I come off the bench. When we win that game, I'm flying off the bench and jumping for joy with my glorified air cast on my thumb.
A tremendous celebration that followed there, and I'm sure you've seen it. You ended up on the cover of Sports Illustrated right in the middle of things by the time it was said and done. So for the Braves, for yourself, for the guys that came up through the organization that had just kind of joined what was going to be an incredible run throughout the decade of the 90s, this has to rank right at the top of the great memories of your time with the Atlanta Braves, does it not?
100%. I mean, you just don't know. You think you're going to win more, but you enjoy the moment, and we definitely did. And I had a lot of friendships, and seen a lot of guys go to the Hall of Fame, and learned a lot, and just enjoyed playing with all those guys.
That was Ryan Klesko, a member of the 1995 World Series champion Atlanta Braves. Friday night, Truist Park, they're going to celebrate the 35th anniversary of that team. So maybe grab some tickets and make plans to take a trip down memory lane. All right, when we come back, we'll jump in our time machine, come back to 2025, and talk about the weekend that was for the Atlanta Braves and what lays ahead here in 2025. That comes your way next on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game and the Odyssey app.
Now, back to more From the Diamond. From the Diamond is brought to you by Window Nation. Get 2 windows free with every 2 you buy and pay nothing for 2 years. Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Welcome back into From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. Live from the Kia Studios on a Sunday as we continue putting the finishing touches on this weekend. Also looking forward for what the Braves are going to have ahead of them as they return to Truist Park to welcome the Chicago White Sox, beginning their series on Monday. Just reflecting, though, on that Ryan Klesko conversation that you just heard. I've known Ryan for, I would say, a little over 10 years. We've had an opportunity to do a few shows together here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game, a couple spring trainings, and a lot of other time around the ballpark. And one of the most candid and just open guys that you'll ever have a chance to talk to about baseball. And it's always fun to, as someone who grew up on the 1980s Braves and was entreated to the 1990s Braves, and you might say, yeah, well, there were some things that didn't go right in the 90s. Yes, there were. There certainly were. I lived them too. I understand it. But that 95 World Series, I think the only thing that when I look back on that I just wish I could change is, what if there was just no strike? Now, that might have changed a lot of things in baseball. I don't really know. But just no strike, nothing kind of taking away from that moment and that, I'm sure validation that came for those teams that had gotten to the World Series twice before and hadn't been able to win it. And then when I've talked to other members of that team, and I'm sure I'll see a few of them on Friday as the Braves have that big 30th anniversary of the 95 team that's happening at Truist Park this weekend, that 96 up 2 on the Yankees don't win that series. That's the one that got away. 1991 for me is the one I wish they had won because, wow, what an end to that fairy tale it would have been. But it was also the start of a lot of great things for the Braves. So, yeah, anyway, a lot of fun talking to Ryan Klesko about that and looking forward to that reunion, which will be happening on Friday at Truist Park. So if you want to enjoy that little bit of nostalgia in what has been a challenging year, it's always fun to look back, and that was the height of those great 90s teams. So maybe I'll see you out at the ballpark. Anyway, what's going on at the ballpark here lately for the Braves? A couple of other pitching notes I want to get to, and then we've got to talk some about the offense. And we do, of course, have to talk about Michael Harris II because I think he has been the story of the second half for this suddenly resurgent Braves team. Is it too soon to say that they're resurgent? I don't know. I'm not really sure. They've won 8 out of 9. They've got a 5-game winning streak. I'm not really sure what to do with that information because it doesn't feel like we've been able to have a string of baseball like that all year long because they haven't. This 5-game winning streak they're on is the longest that the Braves have enjoyed this year. But I was looking back at some of the numbers for Raisel Iglesias, because obviously we talked a lot about the trade deadline. And is there a club out there that would be interested in Raisel Iglesias? And potentially there were. But was there a club that was going to give you something of value for him? Because you can't give him a qualifying offer. He's already had one. So if he goes to free agency, you're not getting a compensatory draft pick for him. But was a team willing to take on the $6-ish million, I believe, that he was owed for the remainder of the season? And the Braves weren't able to find that deal. And they weren't just going to ship guys off to play somewhere else, not get anything of value, and also pay them to play somewhere else. I think that was ultimately where this landed for Alex Anthopoulos and company when any talks were had about Raisel Iglesias or any club was interested in him. It was going to have to be a worthwhile deal. And if you go back and look at Iglesias, I mean, coming into the first week of June, his season had been just an abject disaster. His home run prone issues were well documented. The slider that he has all but scrapped at this point because it's just not been a pitch that's worked for him. He uses it every once in a while and sometimes to better effect than others. But Raisel was sitting on a 6.75 ERA through 25 appearances, had lost his closer's job or was about to because on the 9th of June, the Braves blew that gigantic lead against the Arizona Diamondbacks in that 11-10 loss. And Raisel was the last guy in, and obviously the Diamondbacks were able to cap their comeback against him. But since then, Raisel Iglesias, so this is the second week of June on, has made 30 appearances, 1.63 ERA. He's picked up 11 saves. He has walked just 4 batters and struck out 32. And 4 of the 5 runs that he's allowed in those, make it 29 appearances, They all came in one game, and it was right after the All-Star break against the Yankees. I think everybody remembers that, and that's why I said, that slider, it's been a bit of a problem this year. But you cannot complain about what Raisel Iglesias has been able to do. It just kind of falls into that all-too-big category for the Braves. It's like, okay, well, if you'd done some of this earlier in the year, where would we be right now? And that's not altogether unfair, but I don't know that I can necessarily point at Iglesias and say, well, this was the biggest problem. It certainly didn't help. And then when you dealt with some of the other bullpen issues, no Joe Jimenez, who may not pitch at all this year, a bullpen that was just looking for guys to come in and contribute to it, and then the complete and total collapse of the starting rotation due to injury, it was just one more thing that you didn't want to have to deal with is, all right, well, do we have a closer? Or has our closer, who was great last year, by the way, completely lost his way and lost his job? And it looked like in the first couple of weeks of June, that could indeed be the case. But credit to Raisel. He's really turned things around. And I asked this question last week, and I'll probably ask it again before we're done for the season. Would the Braves be interested in maybe brokering a return for Raisel Iglesias in 2026? Maybe on a shorter-term deal. I don't think he's going to get another 5 or 6 year contract, but he's a guy that does fit in with what they want to do. He did, I'll admit it, have a bad start to his season, but how he's finished, I think, has been a lot more indicative of what he's been able to do throughout the course of his career. So perhaps at the right price, the Braves would be interested in that. But they also obviously know they need to get some other bullpen reinforcements to help them out, to give them all of the high-leverage arms and late-inning weapons and all the arms it takes to get to those guys in that bullpen, a lot more setup than it was here in 2025. And no, that is not a reliever setup pun. Chris Sale made a rehab start for the Gwinnett Stripers on Sunday. 4 innings of 1-run ball, 3 hits, 1 walk, 4 strikeouts. Sale's up to 56 pitches now, through 39 of those for strikes. I think one more rehab start that gets him to, let's call it 75 pitches. Maybe you start thinking about he can make that next turn for Atlanta, because you're going to manage the pitch count and obviously the innings as a result of that. But maybe we could see Chris Sale back in maybe a little over a week, 10 days, into the month anyway, or early September if he has to make another start at the minor league level. But Chris Sale pitching again this year, that's something that will be a boost for a club that is playing some better baseball lately, albeit we are talking about the middle of August, and we are talking about a club that's still 12 games under 500. But you just kind of start to wonder what kind of momentum they can begin to build, or what kind of good can they make of all the bad that has happened thus far this season to at least close it out on a better note than the way it started and played out over the first 3 or so months. So we'll see what happens, what the next step is for Chris Sale, obviously. And we got to talk about some offensive stuff. And how about the Braves offense in general? Another comeback win on Sunday as they pick up a 5-4 victory over the Cleveland Guardians. They complete a 3-game sweep. And they've done much of this with not a lot from Ronald Acuña Jr., who was on the injured list, and not much from Austin Riley either. And who thought that would be a thing? Get the Braves offense rolling and not have Acuña, not have Riley in the middle of it. Okay. Well, that's what they've done here. In the second half, only the Milwaukee Brewers have scored more runs than the Braves, who've scored 148 runs. Brewers have scored 180 since the break. And the next closest is the San Diego Padres, who came into the day with 128 runs. The Braves, meanwhile, over that period of time, because I always get this question, people are like, okay, well, the Braves score all their runs on homers. Nope, not so fast. They're only 17th in Major League Baseball in home runs, so middle of the pack. This is not a home run heavy team. And as you've noticed, there have been a lot more clutch hits and a lot more hits of the non-homer variety that have been building up some of their big innings and some of the general consistent offense that they've been putting up lately. And not only have they been picking up hits and scoring runs, but they've also led the major leagues in walk percentage as a club since the All-Star break. And they're doing all of that with their hottest hitter, Michael Harris, still not walking. He's not walking, but he's hitting a ton. But we got to talk about what Harris has done, because the second half has been absolutely ridiculous. His string of 8 consecutive multi-hit games, which tied a Braves record set by 4 others, ended on Sunday because he only got 1 hit. So the hitting streak continues. The multi-game hitting streak may be done. But Harris leads the National League in wins above replacement, according to Fangraphs, over Shohei Ohtani. That, I think, is notable. Anytime you're on a list of something you've done right and Shohei Ohtani is behind you, I think you're doing some pretty good stuff. Overall, hitting .386 coming into the day with a .719 slugging percentage. Both of those numbers in the second half, tops in the National League, as were his 8 home runs, most by any outfielder in the National League in the second half. So all of a sudden, Michael Harris II has gone from being a hitter in which you wondered if he was ever going to get going to a guy that opposing pitchers can't figure out how to stop. He has been that good. He leads Major League Baseball in hits since the All-Star break with 45 of those. So a very impressive amount of work for Michael Harris over this last 30 or so games. And here, especially in the second half, because you remember the stance change happened right before the break. But overall in the second half, there's just no question about how good Michael Harris II has been. Because if you look across Major League Baseball and across the National League, you'll find Harris's name in the top 5 of just about any good category that you can look for as far as hitters are concerned. And this 31-game stretch that began during that Cardinals series right before the All-Star break for Michael Harris, he has upped his batting average 49 points in the middle of a season. 90 games into the year, if you're able to rip off a stretch where you bump your average up 50 points, you've done some serious work, and that is exactly what Michael Harris II has done. The other wow hitter for the Braves here lately over the past 3 weeks has been Marcell Ozuna. He's definitely found his swing again. He's found his power. 283, 7 homers, 18 runs knocked in his 17 games coming into Sunday. Only 15 of those starts, though, and he's now up to 20 homers on the year. Closing in on 300 for his career. I didn't realize, just because of everything that had kind of been going wrong for him for a couple of months, that he was on the doorstep of that milestone. But that would be a nice way for him to end this season as well. Ozuna closing in on that 300 home run mark. 4th consecutive 20-homer season, 20-plus for Marcell Ozuna. And I know that the other side of that coin has been, should we be seeing more Drake Baldwin than Marcell Ozuna? The answer to that question I do think is yes. Should we be seeing more Drake Baldwin in general? I think the answer to that is yes. And I think that over the next 5-6 weeks, we will see plenty of him, but he is a catcher. And he is going to need some actual days off. Not, hey, you're not catching, you're DHing every single day for the rest of the season. There is going to be a case to be made for a catcher in the most grueling position in baseball to get a little bit of time here and there. And I think that a couple of days this weekend, maybe that gets him recharged, gets him rested up. I'll be interested to see how much Baldwin is in the lineup on this upcoming homestand, which begins on Monday against the White Sox. But those are some things that are going on with the Braves and their offense right now. I got a few more of those to hit before we get out of here. As we continue, this is From the Diamond. I am Grant McAuley, and this is Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. You can hear it right here and on the Odyssey app.
I love baseball. Now back to more Grant McAuley and From the Diamond. Brought to you by Mark Spain Real Estate. Get a guaranteed offer from Mark Spain Real Estate. 855-299-SOLD. On Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Welcome back into From the Diamond with Grant McAuley here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game, live from the Kia Studios, closing out this edition of the show and the weekend for the Braves. A good one up in Cleveland as they take all 3 from the Guardians. They've won 8 out of 9. They've won 5 in a row. They come home to play the Chicago White Sox, who are better this year than they've been in the past, but ultimately we'll see if the Braves can keep their momentum going and maybe do a little bit of winning at home, because they do start a homestand of 6 games. They get the White Sox for 3, and then they get the New York Mets for 3 games. And my goodness, we haven't talked about this very much, but the New York Mets have been an absolute mess over the past, I want to say, at least 2 or 3 weeks. Definitely their second half has gone from bad to worse in a lot of ways, as far as their ability to catch and or keep up with the Philadelphia Phillies. I mean, look, nothing has been decided, I guess, in this division race. And there is a case to be made that, you know, with the Philadelphia Phillies and the news that they got this week, that the door is still open. It's a 5.5 game difference between these two teams. But the word that I'm talking about is Zach Wheeler, the ace of their staff, one of the best pitchers in baseball, has been placed on the injured list dealing with a blood clot issue. How long he'll be out is anybody's guess. Aaron Nola is already on the injured list. I know that Christopher Sanchez is having a remarkable season for them. But you lose a guy like Zach Wheeler. Not only does that put a dent in trying to sew up your National League East title and punch your ticket to the postseason, but then what are you going to do in the postseason with no Zach Wheeler? And this is a question, and Stephen Tolbert and I talked about this in the first hour as well. If you missed that, you can subscribe to From the Diamond wherever you get your podcast. You can also find it in the Odyssey app. But Stephen, a host over at Hammer Territory, another great podcast I recommend that you subscribe to if you love the Braves, and you probably do if you're listening to this show because it's been a long year, a tough year. But as we were talking about, to put all that aside, when you get to the postseason, you want your best pitchers to be available. Zach Wheeler qualifies as one of those, no matter what pitcher or really what planet that he would be pitching on. So that would be a tough blow for the Philadelphia Phillies. But again, we'll see what happens. The Mets, though, have been a club that has been pretty much in a free fall of late. They beat up on Spencer Strider in the most recent series on this road trip prior to the stop in Cleveland. But then the Braves turned around and stunned them with a couple of comebacks and took 2 out of 3 in that series. And the Atlanta Braves in 2025, I think we know, have had a little bit of trouble dealing with certain teams. And if you go and look up and down the head-to-head for the Braves this year, what teams do they have a winning record against? Well, they're 5-2 against the Cincinnati Reds, 3-0 against the Cleveland Guardians, 4-2 against the Rockies. They are 6-4 against the Miami Marlins. They swept the Minnesota Twins in a 3-game series. Then you get down, New York Mets. Braves are 7-3 against the Mets this year. They're also 4-2 against the Cardinals as far as all the clubs they have a winning record against head-to-head. And the Mets, of course, you remember that one 3-game sweep about, it's probably over a month ago now, but you kind of thought, it's been almost 2 months, actually. Gosh, that's how quickly time is flying and how fast the summer is going. Was that going to be the series that got the Braves going again? Better late than never. But at this point, the better late than never is a little bit too late for the Braves. But for the New York Mets, every single one of these games is going to be them clinging to life in the National League East. And they are still, of course, in the wild card. Those standings allow for a little bit more competition, and we'll see how that ultimately all plays out. But this is a club that has just gone the wrong way very quickly here in the second half. They were able to pick up a win over the Seattle Mariners on Saturday, but losing 2 out of 3 to the Atlanta Braves. And prior to that, they had lost 7 in a row, including being swept by the Milwaukee Brewers. Hey, join the club. Swept by the Cleveland Guardians. They lost 2 out of 3 to the San Francisco Giants. They had been swept by the San Diego Padres. So you're looking at a run of, about 3 weeks where the Mets won like once a week. That will not get the job done over the final 5 or 6 weeks, that's for sure. All of that being said, there are some things to be played for as far as the schedule is concerned for the New York Mets when they roll into town. And the Braves, I'm sure, would not mind whatsoever adding to their miseries by trying to take another series this coming up week at Truist Park. Now, I mentioned this earlier. We're not sure when we're going to see Austin Riley again. It did sound like on the road trip, because he traveled with the team, that he could be close to coming off the injured list. They put him back through those paces over at third base because if you'll remember, when he got hurt in St. Louis, it was fielding a ball and throwing back across his body to complete a play. And he was on the IL there for the 10-day stint. Much of that was in the middle of the All-Star break, so that you thought was fortuitous, and he was back. And then he injured himself again a couple of weeks ago at that Speedway Classic trying to run down Ellie De La Cruz. And no, that's not a typo or a misspeak, I guess, if you're actually talking. But, yeah, he was able to tag him out, but at what cost? Potentially re-injuring himself, and that ultimately was what they found. But it's just a lower abdominal strain that Riley is dealing with. It's obviously hurting him the most on certain plays, defensively speaking. May or may not really be as much of an issue when he's swinging, but I can't imagine that either of those motions really helps if you have not healed. So we'll see if Austin Riley maybe is ready to start this week against the White Sox, or if they'll just reassess him and run him back through and just continue to kind of wait this thing out and let it heal. Because it's not an oblique injury, which when you hear that word, you can pretty much, more times than not, mark off about a month of that player's season. That's how long it takes to rest and recuperate and then be able to ramp up your activities again if you're dealing with an oblique issue. But this does not seem to be along the lines of that, though it obviously has been troublesome for Austin Riley. And you'd like to get him back in the lineup, just like they got Ronald Acuña Jr. back in the lineup this weekend against the Cleveland Guardians. But Acuña back after that grade 1 calf strain, and a lot of dialogue has been had on this station and others about Ronald Acuña Jr. being back out there, and if he's healthy, and I believe he is, I am of the opinion that he should go play, that he should be allowed to play, because you know that he wants to. I can promise you that. Ronald Acuña Jr. has missed so much time already. And Alex Anthopoulos did talk about this around the trade deadline because the injury happened just before. They felt like they were dealt a little bit of a scare early, but ended up finding out, hey, it's not an Achilles issue. And it maybe if they had never put that word out there, that you wouldn't have been as concerned about it. But the calf issue also raises concerns because we've seen what's happened in other sports. If you're dealing with a calf issue and you push a little bit too hard through that injury. But you need to allow for this injury to subside, and they believe it did by spending a couple of weeks out, getting treatment. He was able to ramp himself up, start hitting, start running, and play some baseball games over the weekend and help the Braves sweep the Cleveland Guardians. And these games matter to him because, again, he needs to close out the year not only just on the right track, but on the field, I believe. Chris Sale said this, about a week and a half ago. You just want to finish the season upright and not on the injured list. That rings true for Ronald Acuña Jr. as well. He's missed plenty of time in his career and doesn't want to miss any more. You do want to be cautious with him. I'm not saying send him out there if he's still hurt. If he's still hurt, well, no, he shouldn't play. But if he's not hurt, he's a player. It's right there in the word. It's right there. Play. He plays the game and should play the game. Now, as far as Ronald Acuña Jr. and where he is in the batting order right now, I think that's still, at least for me, that's a discussion point because I think he does go back to leadoff next season. If not sometime before the year is over, though right now it doesn't seem like that's the way that they're leaning. I'd probably bump him up to 2 right now because I really feel like Matt Olson has kind of cooled off, and I'm still, and I always will be, in the camp of get Ronald Acuña Jr. the most at-bats possible. And if you're not going to hit him in the leadoff spot, maybe hit him at number 2. I don't know. I've never made out the lineup card. Some of this stuff, we may make a bigger deal out of it than it actually matters, but I just feel that it is strange to not see Ronald Acuña Jr. at the top of the order. And Jurickson Profar, who hit a 2-run homer that helped the Braves win the game on Sunday, by the way, has been solid at leadoff. He is patient. He is drawing walks. He is getting on base. But it's just not the job I'd give him over that tone-setting opportunity and player and talent that you have and the talent that Acuña possesses. To me, that's where it all starts. It's just a different dynamic. It's what makes him a superstar. And Profar at leadoff, I went back to the lineup change. So since the 12th of July, coming into Sunday batting .237, not great, .375 on base, that's fine, and 21 runs scored in 30 games. And again, he hit a big 2-run homer on Sunday that helped the Braves win a game. He also dropped a fly ball that's, obviously he wanted to atone for, so that was good to see, both sides of that coin. But I just look at Acuña at number 3 in the lineup, and I think it really hasn't been that jolt that the Braves were kind of selling it as or trying it out for because they were just trying to do anything to get this offense scoring. And again, oddly enough, they've been scoring more without Ronald Acuña Jr. for at least half of that time over the last month, and without Austin Riley for a good portion of that as well. And Acuña came into Sunday batting .216 with 3 homers and just 5 runs batted in since he moved to number 3 in the lineup. But again, he spent a chunk of time on the injured list, so not a lot of time to make a big impact right there. But I still think we're going to see him back in the leadoff spot next season because it just seems to be the spot where Ronald Acuña Jr. belongs. And ultimately, I think the cream rises to the top. Now, why would I want to move Matt Olson out of 2? I went back and looked at this because I'm just trying to figure out. I mean, maybe we're rearranging deck chairs at this point in this whole exercise, but it's still worth looking at. Matt Olson, last couple of months, 51 games, batting .282 with a .381 on base percentage. Those are both great numbers. But he's slugging just .416 in 51 games with only 4 home runs. That is very not Matt Olson. Now, we've seen him go through some peaks and valleys in his time in a Braves uniform. I think no more so than 2022. He went through a 2-month drought where he just couldn't seem to get things going. So .282 with a .381 on base, I mean, sign me up. He's getting on base. That's why he's batting in the number 2 spot of the order. But you're looking for a little bit more punch from Matt Olson, and I know he's looking for some of that from himself as well. But since this lineup got shifted just before the All-Star break, Olson's hitting just .258 with a .360 on base and slugging just .371. So only 2 home runs in his last 31 games. And again, that's just very un-Matt Olson-like. So it's a little bit of a lineup shift, something that you might consider there. You got Marcell Ozuna hitting at the rate that you'd like to see him hitting again. You've got Drake Baldwin and Sean Murphy and that catcher and DH situation, if you want to kind of rotate the 3 of them around. I wouldn't be upset seeing Drake Baldwin get some at-bats at 2 or 3 and then seeing Matt Olson batting 3 or 4. That could be something that could work out as well. But again, these are all things that the Braves have some time to figure out. And maybe they could just workshop a few things over the close of the season that have nothing to do with whether or not Ronald Acuña Jr. is hitting leadoff, which, again, is not going to change the entire trajectory of this year. You'd like to see him healthy. You'd like to see him out there. You'd like to see him producing. And you'd like to see all of these guys just getting whatever momentum that they can built up for the offseason. Because the offseason ahead for the Atlanta Braves is going to be fascinating in my book. Because if they do nothing, well, then what do we learn from 2025? And it can't be that injuries suck. I know that they do. I'm aware of that. We've seen that for years. It's going to happen. You can't manage away from it, which is exactly why I'm saying if Ronald Acuña Jr. is healthy, he should be playing. If Spencer Strider is healthy, he should be pitching. If Chris Sale is healthy, he should be pitching. If you are not, then you shouldn't. But this is just part of that whole thing. The health dynamic, you put as much talent together as you can, but the layers of depth were quickly peeled away for the Atlanta Braves this year. So not only do they need some quality depth this year in the winter to get themselves ready for 2026, I should say, but they also have to kind of reassess, what does the starting rotation look like and what is it missing? Talked about this earlier in the show. Is it missing a proven innings-eating starter? And not just somebody that just goes out there and it doesn't look great, but somebody it's quality and quantity. But you look at their track record and you say, okay, we can count on 30, 31 starts from this guy and 185 innings. And Charlie Morton played that role for a long time, like for several years, I'll put it that way. And Morton was an ace for you, I think, in 21. But then in 22, 23, 24, he just played a valuable role of taking the ball every fifth day, and you never had to wonder where he was. Those guys are valuable too. Maybe looking for one of those over the course of the offseason so that you don't have to worry as much about do we need to, elevate prospects or put people out there without having a usable plan B, which seemed to be ultimately what kind of went wrong in the pitching department for the Braves this year, because you just can't expect to lose 5 opening day starters to the 60-day IL at the same time. If that ever happens again, which I hope to never see it happen again, there's no predicting that. But those are some thoughts heading into the winter. The Braves need to beef up their pitching? Yes. Do they need to add to the bullpen? Yes. Do they need to reassess things in the lineup for both the viability of what you got on staff right now and maybe finding somewhere to add another impact player? Most definitely yes. And those are all things that Alex Anthopoulos will have some time to do the shopping for over the winter. Monday, 3-game series against the Chicago White Sox get started at 7:15. An off day on Thursday, then 3 next weekend against the New York Mets. After that, 10-game road trip. Miami Marlins, Philadelphia Phillies, Chicago Cubs. What's going on for the Braves? I want to thank Stephen Tolbert for joining me earlier on in the show to talk all things Braves. Ryan Klesko, the 1995 World Series champion Braves. Appreciate him as well. Great work by my producer Josh as always, and I look forward to catching up with you guys next week right here on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game and the Odyssey app. And until then, so long, everyone.